You look like Ferg, okay?
I like the
All right.
You want us to time yourself?
Yeah.
Everybody's ready?
Yes.
Is my judge ready? I'm not the internet for Mike?
I'm so sorry. Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm judge, the first speaker for that.
Great.
My partner and I firmly affirm the resolution resolved that the Republic of India should sign the Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords are a multilateral agreement between the United States government and other world governments participating in the Artemis program, an American-led effort to return humans to the moon by 2025 with the ultimate goal of expanding space exploration to Mars and beyond. Contingent 1, promoting innovation and commitment to collaboration. India has a robust space program with big ambitions and is likely the biggest outstanding prize for their ports. As India and U.S. ties have strengthened, their cooperation in the space sector has grown steadily. Particular 22 finds India's Chandrayaan mission to the moon, create 2 NASA payloads, and NASA and the IRSO are jointly working together on a synthetic aperture project called the NISAR. They also plan to launch a defense space agency between the U.S. Space Command and India's Defense Space Agency later this year. The participating countries in the Artemis program, which today include the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and offer an opportunity for India to boost its lunar exploration capacity through collaboration. Joining the Artemis program can also benefit India in terms of technology for co-financing lunar and other space projects and gaining access to critical space technologies. The Artemis program provides India an opportunity to collaborate on space activity with both the U.S., a major spacefaring state, as well as other emerging spacefarers. This can boost India's own lunar exploration program, create opportunities for co-financing lunar projects, and increase access to critical space technologies and bring commercial opportunities. Bondari 21 asks, India needs partners in this domain. Considering the long-term gestation period of most space-related projects, India would do well to have a partner with reliable spacefaring countries that have a dependable track record of cultivating strong private players in space. The Artemis Accords would be a good starting point. India's participation in multilateral mechanisms like the Quad or the rapidly growing ranks of the Artemis Accords may just be the right format. By being a part of the Accords, India's space companies could be part of a global supply chain, along with Indian space enterprises and new space startups. This would also help attract investment capital to bring Indian space startups and lead to a flow of capital to India. India's space program is the top 6 in the world, which means that India has plenty of capacity for space missions. And if India joined the Artemis Accords, India would be able to play an integral part in the Artemis Accords. India has much to gain from the Artemis program, which opens up the possibility of creating a framework for supply chains and technology transfer, as well as avenues for private sector participation. Albert 22 explains that the space sector is not only a growth sector, it is also a key enabler of growth in other sectors. Deployment of new space infrastructure brought benefits to energy, transportation, and urban development. Critically, most of this money comes from the space sector. Contention 2 is giving India a share. In the status quo, Kim 23 finds that space is commercializing faster than ever in what is expected to become a $1 trillion industry. Unfortunately, Geek 22 finds that India is hamstrung by poor innovation and technology, ranked 54 out of 56 as it has one of the most hostile environments in the world for driving innovation. Luckily, Artemis can fix this in 2 ways. Subpoint A is PPPs, public-private partnerships. Artemis boosts PPPs as Figure 22 finds that NASA generated a total of $71 billion in economic activity with domestic and international companies, acting as the biggest contributor to private sector projects, creating 37,000 jobs through 700 PPPs. Thus, Sequence 22 explains that Artemis will serve as a testbed for technology developed through PPPs. This is uniquely beneficial as Jones 21 writes that PPPs allow commercial space companies to introduce innovation and expertise while also allowing the government to provide regulatory oversight. The impact is economy. Honey 22 continues. Space could make India a $5 trillion economy by 2024, raising GDP by 1%. Without this, a 1% decrease in economic growth pushes 20 million people into poverty. That's reassuring. Thank you.
Make sure to introduce yourself.
I'm Hank Stolaric. Judge, ready? Opponents, ready? Partner, ready?
Yep.
Time starts on my first word. Zach and I negate the resolution. Our first contention is upsetting Russia. In the status quo, India has close ties with Russia. Sen 22 explains that India wants to maintain a positive relationship with Russia because it needs Moscow's support in resolving its territorial conflicts with its neighbors, especially China. It also wants to continue to enjoy economic and military support from Russia. Furthermore, Russia repeatedly supported India at the UN on issues like Kashmir. This close relation is significant to the Indian economy. The Indian embassy provides that, as per Russian figures, bilateral trade amounted to USD $9.31 billion, with Indian exports to USD $3.48 billion and imports amounting to USD $5.83 billion. Reuters 23 finds that Russia supplied India with around $13 billion in arms in the past 5 years, and New Delhi has placed orders with Moscow for weapons and military equipment exceeding $10 billion. These quotes are significant because they prove just how important ties with Russia are for India. Moreover, India has benefited immensely from Russian aid in the space race. Shafirdi 21 explains Russia is planning to set up ground-based stations in India for receiving communication signals of GLONASS. Similarly, ISRO will be allowed to set up IRNSS ground stations in Russia, calling it another giant leap in Indo-Russian collaboration in the realm of space. Indeed, PDI 21 adds that India and Russia vowed to deepen collaboration in the space sector, including the human spaceflight program, and signed an agreement for cooperation in building as well as the operation of launch vehicles. The signing of the Artemis Accords affects these close ties. Ramanthon 21 finds that the development of two rival programs and two potentially conflicting frameworks for lunar governments creates a new dilemma for India. The decisions it takes will be based not just on its lunar ambitions, but also on the state of its relations with the three major powers spearheading voyages to the moon and beyond. Faust 22 explains the head of Russian Space Agency said that the Lunar Gateway, part of NASA's Artemis lunar exploration program, is too U.S.-centric for it to participate in, even though the Gateway leverages the existing International Space Station partnership. The impact is economic collapse. With criticism of the Artemis Accords from its BRICS allies, India should not sign the Artemis Accords because this would upset its delicate diplomatic balance. With more than billions of USD in trade between Russia and India, cannot afford to upset its ally. Our second contention is economic disproportion. The Artemis Accords disproportionately benefits the U.S. at the expense of its signatory states. Mike 20 explains to us that bullion buyers take special aim at the planned bilateral agreements known as the Artemis Accords. In promoting them, the U.S. is overlooking best practice with regard to the sustainable development of space. NASA's actions must be seen for what they are: a concerted strategic effort to redirect international space cooperation in the favor of short-term U.S. commercial interests with little regard for the risks involved. Jessica 22 furthers that the Artemis Accords are not collaborative multilateral rulemaking, but rather the export of U.S. laws abroad. The U.S. intends to use the Artemis Accords to claim property rights in space. Jones 20 states, although the Artemis Accords are not explicit about property rights, what the U.S. officials said to Reuters, it is consistent with U.S. policy on this point, which is that the return of humans to the moon for long-term exploration and utilization, which importantly will involve commercial as well as international partners. The Accords are likely to cement any deal-making in favor of the U.S. at the expense of other countries like India. Edith 13 explains the global community is experiencing economic recession. Outer space development is emerging as an answer. The question is, to whom will the benefits accrue? Once legal rights in space are granted, only those with the capital to take advantage of the new laws and policies will be in a position to profit. Jessica 22 agrees, when countries, especially powerful ones, create rules that counter to these norms, multilateral institutions can unravel or even worse, become irrelevant, resulting in less equitable institution that favors powerful nations and provides an unfair opportunity to reap benefits. The negative effects of economic inequality is severe. The UN themselves explain high levels of inequality of opportunity to discourage skills, accumulation, choke economic and social mobility, and human development, and consequently depress economic growth, increases social discords and tensions, and triggers violence and conflicts. In summary, by negating the resolution, we can prevent the loosening of ties between India and Russia, prevent the economic collapse of a nation inhabited by nearly 1.5 million people, and prevent the infringement of nations like India and the economic inequality that would follow. Negate today for a better tomorrow.
You said million instead of billion.
When?
You were talking about population. You said 1.5 million.
My bad.
He said 1.5 million instead of 1.5 billion. It is 1.5 billion.
Yes. Would you like first question?
Okay, time starts now. So you said that if India was to join the Artemis Accords, Russia would retaliate.
Yes.
Okay, but didn't you just say that it would they're good, they have good ties? So why would they retaliate if India was to join the Artemis Accords?
So you mentioned one of the big is a Quad alliance, right? And that is an alliance which signifies to Russia that India is more Western leaning, versus the BRICS, which puts them in the middle. Like BRICS and Quad sort of even them out. The Artemis Accords is what tips the scale and is what will will be the final straw for Russia, because the signal, like joining the Artemis Accords, will not be tolerated by Russia because they see it as far too U.S.-centric for them to continue cooperation with India.
If they see it as far too U.S.-centric, they don't have to join. This is for India to boost its own lunar exploration capacity.
Yes, but the problem is India is so reliant on Russia that if it makes, right, India isn't criticizing what Russia is doing in Ukraine right now, even though it's the same reason, right? Because they're afraid of making Russia mad because they need Russia. This is the same situation. They shouldn't join the Artemis Accords because it'll make Russia mad, which puts in jeopardy their entire economy and all 1.5 billion people that live in India.
If you're connecting it to the Ukraine conflict, is India helping Russia with its operations in Ukraine at the moment?
It's merely an example that they're not criticizing
It's just turning a blind eye. Saying like that, Russia can do the same for India.
But they're not, though, because that's not what Russia does.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So you said how India already has a big space program. Why do they need Artemis? Where does Artemis come in handy? Why do they need more help?
Okay, the reason India has a very modest space program at the moment, even though it's had successful missions in the past. So with increased collaboration and the unique benefits that they get from Artemis, they'll be able to increase their capacity for space exploration and have access to better resources and better collaboration.
Okay, so real quick. So you're saying if we can prove that if India is on par with other powers or close to, then that disproves your contention, because then it makes it worthless for them.
Well, you can't look at it like that because India only has like a certain amount of money. Considering it's the second most overpopulated country in the world, India can't spend that much money on it. So for it to reach where it has right now, working with other countries, they can all have this same common set of goals, which will allow them to better work and collaborate and have better connections with the countries themselves. India actually has ties with the U.S. As we said in our case, they had the Chandrayaan-1 mission, which showed that India has worked with the U.S. and Russia has not retaliated to this. Why would they retaliate to just signing up on a non-binding agreement that they can work together with the U.S.?
Because it would be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to say. It's too much for Russia to be able to turn a blind eye to, because they've already dealing with India, doing missions with the U.S., joining Quad. This is already stressing their relations to the limit.
Willing to risk, for example, there's 23 countries in the Artemis Accords. And these 23, if India was to join the Artemis Accords, this would mean that they're willing to work with these 23 countries and they're willing to have a good relationship. Is Russia really willing to retaliate knowing this?
Russia is one of India's most important trade partners, so I believe that yes, it is, and that is
But
time.
won't they themselves be losing money if
That's
they
time.
were to retaliate? Bring it into a blank cap. Starting now.
Okay, so I'm going to talk.
Innovation and economy.
Yeah,
Those are two.
Econ. They briefly mentioned national security, I think.
Why? What part of their case talks
I
about
don't know. I should that national security.
I wouldn't do that one.
Don't do national.
No, because I don't have it.
Wait, what did you have coming after cooperation collab?
Really just it's job creation.
This.
Oh yeah, that India is going to launch space defense, which is nullified by multiple treaties about outer space not having weapons, so that's pointless.
Okay, but is that not a national defense thing?
What is
The national defense card is basically India should not focus on space-based assets.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, you're right. But make sure to be specific. And then, so yeah, it's economy, national security, and then innovation. Do we have anything for collaboration? I mean, it's not really that important, but
We're strengthening diplomacy.
nah,
That was a minute 11.
maybe actually.
Minute 11. You can.
I'm Ruby Berta. My time will start now. On my opponent's first contention about upsetting Russia, joining the Accords doesn't actually harm Russia. It is that India is adopting a new framework for space exploration, and there's no way Russia would outcast India just because they signed a space agreement that Russia has also signed. For Russia, the benefits of retaliating are nothing close. The harm of retaliation is losing a close ally, and they won't do it. Mohandas 21 explains that India signing up for the accords must not be equated to severing ties with Russia. India has maintained a relationship with Russia in other strategic areas, and same could be applied for space after India signs the accords as well. Ramathan 21 writes that neither of these options are mutually exclusive, which means that India can pursue more than one partner at the same time. Furthermore, India has already been working with the US for 60 plus years, so just signing the accords will completely sever ties with Russia. Onto how they say that the accords are US centric, so Russia does not would not like if India is to join, but Artemis was written with the input of multiple countries. Gershwin writes that NASA released a draft of the accords to other spacefaring countries, and after getting their input, the agency came up with the final document. They changed things like standards for lunar mining and conflict resolution. This only goes to show that multiple countries have collaborated into the writing of the accords, and it is not US-centric as well. Furthermore, most opposition to Artemis comes from Russia and China, who are already biased against them. But Harvard 23 finds that the most criticism that both of these countries are rivals of the Artemis, but if they're the ones criticizing it, there is no objective evidence that the accords are truly US-centric. Onto my opponent's second contention on the economic disproportion. India already working with the U.S. has been successful, and this leads to economic benefits, as we mentioned in our case, for India. So only the U.S. So India signing the accords is only going to increase these economic benefits that they are already seeing. Furthermore, NASA released a draft of the accords to other spacefaring countries after getting input. So the U.S. centricism of this is not true. Judge, U.S. has already had many successes in the space sector, and India joining onto them and the other many countries that they're working with is only going to help them expand this towards the Indian space sector. In our case, we talk about how working with the Quad is good for India, and signing the accords will increase the collaboration happening between these countries as well. With the economic benefits, with the increase in GDP and the $5 trillion economic increase, the less people that are in poverty for India is only beneficial, and signing the accords and working with these countries will only help India.
We'll take a little bit of running prep. Sorry. Okay.
That sounds like that.
Yeah. So have what you have already. So try and read that quickly. And just say that Russia doesn't need a real reason to stop trade, as they are authoritarian. They can stop trade just because India doesn't. Putin doesn't like. I can say that. Because I can expand on it. I just need to more mention these things. And then they just say that India is working with the US now, and while that is true, in like capital investments and say a new factory is a lot different than a space trip within a space accord, right? And then I can expand on that later. But then after you do that, circle back and burn it down.
I don't know if I'll mention after you did that. But okay. That was about a minute of prep. Okay, a little off-time roadmap before I get started here. I'm gonna mention some of the things that are wrong with their case, and then move in to defend our case, as well as, if I have time at the very end, do some weighing. Time will start on my first word. One of my opponent's major contentions is economy. The Indian economy would benefit by joining the Artemis Accords. However, the Space Amendment is already helping India's economy without joining the Artemis Accords. Ramadesh 22 found that thanks to India's well-developed space program, the satellite manufacturing sector is likely to go from $3.2 billion in market value in 2025 from just 2.1 billion in 2020, while launch services will surge to 1 billion in 2025, over double the 567.4 million in 2020. This explosion in growth indicates a very strong space program. Indeed, Single 22 writes, by far, satellite manufacturing segment will be the second fastest growing in the Indian space economy. Additionally, I would like to talk about, other countries will not see benefits from the Artemis Accords because the US will have too much unilateral power. O'Brien 20 explains that the United States will unilaterally interpret the Outer Space Treaty to allow space resource extraction. There will also be safety zones to avoid harmful interference, such as mining operation. The effect is to establish exclusive economic zones, especially if harmful interference is defined as some economic harm. This is a slippery slope of using unilateral action to establish economic rights rather than just international agreement. Additionally, my opponent mentioned national security briefly, so I will touch on that briefly. India should not focus on space-based national security. India has threats much closer to home. Pant 19 explains along its land frontiers, India faces disputed borders and territorial claims with both China and Pakistan. He adds the twin military challenges posed by China and Pakistan thus reflect critical shift in these two countries' military capabilities and operational postures. They demand, in turn, different command structures involving tri-service cooperation capabilities for the Indian Armed Services. Indeed, if India were to want to focus on space-based national security, it would want to develop it on its own. Roger, I don't know how to say that, 23 writes that India's approach to space is now driven by a sense of pragmatism and by national security concerns, as opposed to the morality and sovereignty-related considerations that shaped the program up until the 1990s. My opponent also talked about the technological innovations. However, India is already innovating new space technologies. As I previously mentioned, by 2025, the satellite manufacturing segment will be the second fastest growing in the Indian space economy, as well as we will see billions upon billions of dollars. Single 22 adds that currently India boasts over 100% space tech startups. The year 2021 was a watershed year for space tech startups, with investments reaching $68 million, a year-over-year increase of 196%. There were a total of 47 new space tech startups in India in 2021. Additionally, my opponents want to talk about how there would be no harm to Russia, but they didn't have a source for this. And Russia does not need a reason to cut off ties with India. While the Artemis Accords would be a reason, they do not need one. As we all know, Russia is a very authoritarian state, and Putin, the head of state, is solely concerned with public image. He would drop India if they so much as said he looked funny. Additionally, my opponent seemingly attempted to discredit all arguments by stating there was no mutual exclusion between the Artemis Accords and other space programs. But doesn't that hurt our opponent's case? They're talking about all these benefits, but who's to say they get these benefits if there's no mutual exclusion with the Artemis Accords? This is why you need to negate today.
Cool. Yeah, you did fine. You did great. I can expand on those. I can do my thing. Chicken wing.
You built a chicken wing.
What I do is
Okay, are you ready?
you just leave that aside.
Yes.
Can I have a first question?
Go ahead.
You say that that India joining Artemis Accords would upset Russia because of the U.S. centricism, but since as we mentioned in our case, the India and US have been working together and they've had successful missions, so why hasn't that upset Russia? Why hasn't Russia done anything yet?
Well, it may have upset Russia, but not to the point that Russia is willing to cut off all trade ties. So Russia can get upset, but at a certain point, it is too far. India has crossed a line, and that is when there are going to be negative effects with international rules.
Okay, can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
You proceed to say that Russia doesn't need a reason to cut ties, so is it like, couldn't they have cut ties already if they don't need
They
a
could have.
reason?
While they don't need a reason is having a reason is going to increase the chances of it happening. And Artemis Accords is that reason.
That's
Artemis
just
is
the
a,
unpredictability of Russia, so how does like joining the Artemis Accords like say that Russia is definitely...
well, Artemis Accords are a Western focused space not organization but space treaty, right? So it is going to draw India more towards the West, more towards the United States and its allies, which would make Russia upset, as Russia and the United States are diametrically opposed. May I have a question?
Yeah.
I wanted to question your bias claim. You said that we can't say it's U.S. centered because it's biased, and then go on to quote. Then go on to talk about how a bunch of these Western sources, a bunch of these U.S. Favoring sources are in favor of the Artemis Accords. Is that not biased for the Artemis Accords?
Could you restate your question?
Okay, you talked about how we can't say the Artemis Accords are U.S. centered because it came from a Russian source, correct?
No, I said that we can't say that the Artemis Accords are U.S. centered because they have been like worked on by multiple countries, and since that Russia is already like opposed to the U.S.
So Russia already being opposed makes them biased, is what you're saying.
No, I'm just saying that like, well, yeah, pretty much they already like.
So
they
then
don't
would
like-
the U.S. not be biased in favor of the Artemis Accords? Because they made them?
They weren't the only people.
Okay, they weren't the only people, but the U.S. and its allies, U.S., Canada, I believe you said Australia, most of Canada. Canada was a big thing you said. You also said Luxembourg and a bunch of European states are all members of the Artemis Accords. Those are all U.S. allies, so it is presumable that they would agree with the U.S. on many things, right? Specifically in this instance, space. So wouldn't that make them biased towards the Artemis Accords?
But what does this have to do with?
Well, you're trying to tell us we're biased. That's fine.
Are you guys gonna take prep?
Just running prep.
Okay, so I'm gonna collapse onto our economic distribution one because I think that's a good one. But I'll make sure I keep the defense of just saying who is it on. In nicer terms. And then the whole US doesn't matter for that contention where it's from because we're talking about how big Russia use in the Artemis Accords, right? So I'm gonna do that. And then India's working with the US right now, and there's a big difference between how we're working right now and what working with the Artemis Accords would even mean.
You could also talk about how we said U.S. space success, but Russia's supposed to have massive space success. I intended to say that.
I'll say it.
I think we should get that to say something.
That was 50 seconds.
I'll say it for
All right, 50 seconds.
Am I finished ready?
Yes.
Am I just ready? I'm just going to do a quick off-time record. So first I'm going to extend our case, and I'm going to refer back to the responses on our case, and then if time permits, I'm going to respond to the responses to our response.
A lot of responses there.
Time starts. Okay. So our first contention was promoting innovation and commitment to collaboration. India has a robust space program, but as we have previously said, it is very modest. And with working through the Artemis Accords, they will be a part of a group of 23 other countries working together towards similar space objectives and working and having shared resources and information. India needs to boost its lunar capacity. Already, it's as we said, it was 54 out of 56 in innovation. It has one of the most portable innovation platforms, which just goes to show that they need to work with other countries. Moving on to our second contention, giving India share. India private partnerships and Artemis can give India more commercial opportunities. Moving back to their case. So the first contention was upsetting Russia. They've already worked with the U.S. in their past, as our opponent has conceded. But if there has been no retaliation right now, what difference is it going to make if they send a non-binding multilateral agreement? Moving on. Russia provides weapons for India. Russia is also getting money out of providing these exports to India, so it also harmed them if they suddenly pulled out. And moving on to our opponent's claim that the Artemis Accords are too U.S.-centric. Just if the Accords are so U.S.-centric, why have 23 countries joined? You have to keep this question in mind when you consider their response. And then regarding the China border dispute, which our opponent brought up in our case, Russia won't be helping India in this conflict because Russia and China are allies. They've been working together in space through the International Lunar Research Station, with the IRLS, which is a direct competitor to Artemis. This just goes to show that if Russia has the ability to increase its own space collaboration, India should be given the same opportunities. And this is not about creating a political competition between these countries. It's for India's capacity and ability to improve its own space innovation and collaboration. Moving back to our opponent's rebuttal, they talked about technological innovation in space startups. Yes, India's program right now is working, but it's not the best it can be. India has done a lot with what they can, but it can be so much better with working with other countries and working with Artemis. They'll be privy to information that they wouldn't otherwise get, and they'll have relationships with other countries who have tried and done the same things, and who are major spacefaring states such as the United States and other Quad countries. Moving on, to space mining, India currently doesn't have the ability to space mine in the status quo, and working with Artemis will allow them to have the ability to be part of this, because with their current economy, they don't have the ability to do this. Now, moving back to PPPs, as we said, it gives economic benefits to India, and it's crucial for India to be a part of Artemis, to expand their own space capacity and work with other countries. And that's very fair. Thank you.
We'll take a little bit of running prep. Okay, so back.
Non-binding. Keep saying it's non-binding. That means
Yeah.
also space mining. You don't win space mining. Literally no.
You're not allowed to space mine, fun fact. But and I'll also just say that they don't actually give any impacts. They just say that you can space mine. I don't think you get caught.
Yeah. Okay.
We use 22 seconds of prep. No, we used a minute 22. You guys still have a minute left.
You minute 23 total, not that.
We used a minute 22 total of prep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Judge, just for a bit of an off-time roadmap, I will start by elaborating on what my opponent said in rebuttal in defense of our case, and then I will reiterate some of the points that my opponent said in rebuttal about their case. Time starts on my first word. So our opponents keep saying that Russia would never jeopardize its relationship with India, that it's trade, that it gets too many things. But then, Judge, I ask you a question. We talked about the war in Ukraine. Why did Russia do that? Why has Russia not pulled out yet? And the reason is because Putin is such a megalomaniac that he will not be seen as weak. He does not want a bad public image. Now, his close allies, his close trading partners, becoming more Western-leaning is exactly what that would do. It would make him look weak. It would make him look like he's supporting Western-leaning countries, and Putin will not allow this. And since Russia is has an autocratic government with Putin at its center, Russia does whatever Putin wants, and Putin refuses to be seen as weak or supporting any Western-leaning country. Now, our opponents keep going on to attack how we said it was how the Artemis program was U.S.-centric. Well, firstly, we were talking about how Russia views it, which then in turn determined their diplomacy with the Artemis program. So that was more towards our first contention, and just saying why Russia doesn't like India joining the Artemis program. Moving on to our second contention, our opponents never mount a proper defense, because we say that not that India won't gain anything, but that India will gain disproportionately less than the U.S., which, as I said in my first speech, that this leads to high levels of inequality of opportunity, discourage skills accumulation, choke economics, social mobility, human development, and consequently depress economic growth. This also increases social discord, tensions, and triggers violence and conflict. Our opponents have never said that the Artemis Accords don't
don't stop this. They've merely said that other Western-leaning, relying on the U.S. countries have supported what they've said. Luxembourg is one of these countries. Do you really think that Luxembourg is going to argue with the U.S. considering how much it relies on the U.S. as a trade partner? I don't think so, and neither should you. Moving on to our opponent's case, is that they've never given impacts. They've said that you can asteroid mine. They never said what asteroid mining lead to. We can get some cool rocks. Now, Judge, if you want to give them impacts, you can, but they haven't said any impacts, and they're not allowed to for the rest of this case. So therefore, nothing they have has contributed. They'll have a bigger space industry. Okay, great, but that doesn't do anything for them, as so they've said, as far as I can tell. Now, moving on to weighing. Time frame. Russia could cut off oil any day. They could just stop the oil flowing, which is one of their biggest trading things. And versus any increased development that this gives India takes years to accrue. Moving on to magnitude, if the Indian economy were to collapse due to cut off with Russia, or the economic disproportion, that affects 1.5 billion people. This is magnitude and scope. And then probability. The Artemis Accords are not legally binding. They're accords. Countries choose to do them. Even if India signs them, it doesn't mean that they're going to get these benefits that our opponents keep saying will happen, which don't even have the impact, as I mentioned before. Therefore, you should negate the resolution.
Are you ready for grandpa?
Yep. Would you like first question?
So you keep connecting this to the war in Ukraine, but can you explain how this collaborates? Because India is an ally of Russia, as you've said this whole entire round, but Ukraine was not an ally of Russia. It was a form of irredentism. That's why, and Russia was always never had good relationships with the United States. So this cannot can you explain how you're tying this together?
Firstly, India is not an ally of Russia. It's in a delicate balance between being an enemy and a friend. Firstly, that is the one important thing. That's part of our first contention. Secondly, the war in Ukraine is a example of Putin's poor decision making. Right? It didn't work. He kept going. It didn't work. Kept going. Sanctions, he kept on going. It shows that no matter what happens to his country, he keeps going regardless of the consequences.
Russia's always going to make bad decisions. Why does it make a difference if individuals?
Because these bad decisions that Russia's going to make revolving around India affect India. The debate is supposed to revolve around what India gains from signing the Artemis Accord. So if they sign them, they don't gain. They don't gain anything. They lose their relationship with Russia. They lose a trading partner.
As we said in our case, they could gain a $5 trillion economy with working with other countries in Artemis.
How are they going to do that when they can't get oil from Russia? Because the U.S. is already maxed out on how much oil they produce, because they use a lot of it, and whatever they do goes to their more immediate allies. Then India, who has put themselves in a position where they have to be friendly but not friendly with everyone.
Any precedent of Russia doing this in the past towards India? Them retaliating against something India has done in the past? Do you have any precedent of this?
We've seen Russian presidents retaliating against countries for doing something, for joining anything Western leaning.
The U.S. and India have been working together for 60 plus years now, and haven't seen anything from Russia yet.
There's been no precedent that we've seen.
Exactly. So, this is the whole point, is that we're saying is that the more Putin gets cornered, and the longer, the more Western leaning, every time India does it, it pushes them closer to the brink of Russia cutting off their ties with them. And it'll be the thing that that's what we're saying. That's what we've proven, is the Artemis Accords is too much for Putin to be able to accept India collaborating with the U.S.
Okay, I think we should move on. I had a question about your 54 out of 56 when it comes to innovation. Is that not just because of how poor India is as a whole? You mentioned there are 54 out of 56 on innovation. Okay, so then
the amount of money. Okay, so India's poor innovation and technology is because of its hostile environment and this driving, which is harming this innovation.
Okay, how does Artemis reduce your quote-unquote hostile environment?
Okay, this is within India. So with working with they're not able to work together within India to get these projects going. So that way we can have outside forces which will be able to, which have already tried and failed at this result, and are being able to better they have the idea, they know what they've been doing, and with work, they like the U.S. is a major space marine state. They can work with India to like solve and make it better, like 10 times better than it can.
So you want foreign powers like the U.S. to intervene in internal Indian dialogue, like government dialogue in between the people? Is that what you're saying you want?
No, we're saying
India is
that
already
India's
working with the U.S.
not
and has. It's not something that they oppose.
Okay, if India has an army,
Time.
oh yeah, sorry.
We have like a middle laptop too.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah, you get that.
Just wait. Yeah. About they had no one back. So nothing. He said back. And then now they might have tried to address our first connection, but our second one falls through. So then again, you can reread this bit if you want, but basically just they actually disproportionately. Right. So do you have anything else?
So no impact. I'm going to bring up the non-voting effect.
Yeah, bring it up. It's not like so even if they were to get these benefits, like so they might not get these things that they're saying they're getting, which will have no impact. I would really stress that they don't have any.
One of these things where I'm trying to find it says, and it's the army's going to be cause Russia.
The one thing we could just say is that like they're not criticizing what's happening in Ukraine, even if a literal war comes. So we can see how afraid like India is afraid of doing anything that will piss off Russia. I can find something out.
So no impact, non-voting.
And then weigh on probability, magnitude, time frame and scope. Do time frame wise.
My time will
Do you
start
have time?
now. As we mentioned in our case and throughout the round, collaboration and innovation is vital for India in the space industry. Joining the Artemis Accords will only help kickstart this, will help boost this innovation that is already happening with the U.S. and with other countries. Furthermore, PPPs provide billions of economic growth and jobs for the people in India, and by joining the Artemis Accords, these benefits will only be increased through the collaboration from from nations that have dominated the space industry for decades. Our opponents claim that Russia and China have a mutually that Russia and India will Russia will cut off ties with India just for signing the Artemis Accords, but in fact they have a mutually beneficial relationship. So just signing the Artemis Accords isn't going to make Russia cut ties completely. The U.S. has been working with India for 60 plus years now, and they have only seen success. And Russia has not done anything to combat to respond to this before. So their point on this is refuted. Furthermore, they bring up Luxembourg as an example, but this is only one example of this is only one country, and the U.S. working with the Quad is a lot more. They're basically saying that since the U.S. is working with the Quad, there's lots of U.S. centrism, but this is just not true, as there are multiple big nations that have added to the Artemis Accords, and we've seen a variety of viewpoints. Furthermore, our opponents continue about how inequality, but the innovation that you will see from joining the Artemis Accords and from working with these big nations will only help combat the innovation. Judge, we urge you to look at the broad scope of the benefits for India from joining the Artemis Accord and urge you to look for it.
We have about,
We have about a minute 30 left in prep time.
we're going to go ahead and take that.
We're gonna take the rest of that.
Then move on and not mine, and then do that.
Non-fresh stuff.
Yeah. Basically, so our opponents they've said that stuff will happen, but they haven't said what this stuff causes really have. They've said that it will cause economic collapse, and then I would again go back and read this, the paragraph, this bit right here, because we have stated exactly what will happen. They have just said that this stuff will happen. They've said that, it'll be good, but they haven't given specifics. We have. And then again, non-binary. Yeah, probability, max question,
From high school, how options are such
Scope is how many people it affects, magnitude is how large it is. So India's economic collapse is magnitude, 1.5 billion people being affected in scope.
Okay. Before I get started, I'm going to give you, Judge, I'm going to have a little off-time roadmap. I'm going to start by addressing some of where our opponent may have slipped up or gotten something wrong, and then I'm going to move into way. Okay, time will start on my first word. My opponent has never directly stated what impact signing the Artemis Accords will have on India. They have mentioned a lot of these things. They've mentioned economic growth and an increase in national security, but they've never directly stated how much this will affect India. We've stated the direct negative downsides. We have talked about how high levels of inequality of opportunity discourage skill accumulation, choke economic and social mobility and human development, and consequently depress economic growth. Those are direct measurable impacts. Now, our opponent also mentioned multiple times that the Artemis Accords are non-binding. And if they are non-binding, then how are the benefits that they keep spouting, these wonderful things they claim, how is India going to get them if they are not binding? Why would the U.S. be encouraged to help India if this is not a binding agreement? Even though it is not binding, our effects are still present. Russia will still react negatively and will still decrease trade, and it still may lead to an economic collapse within India. On to weighing. We outweigh them in probability. If the Artemis Accords are ratified, Russia will react negatively, and it will hurt the Indian economy. We also outweigh on magnitude and scope. The decrease in trade will lead to a potential economic collapse in India. This is a massive problem for India as well as the wider world, and will directly affect over 1.5 billion people. As for time frame, if the Artemis Accords are signed, this will happen quickly. This is not a slow, gradual decrease. This is a rapid shut-off of relations. This is a massive decline, and it is quick. Negate today for a better tomorrow.